Internet's not great actually.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Finally, there we are, we're connected. Alhamdulillah wa shukrillah. We're here sitting with a beautiful company, amazing people, mashallah, la quwwata illa billah, in the most peaceful city on earth, in the city of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So without any further ado, let me have our guests introduce themselves, and we'll enjoy, inshallah, listening to a beautiful recitation from some of them. Bismillah. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Cleon from California.
MashaAllah.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Onali from the UK.
Anali.
Onali, yes. My name is Yahya Rabi from the UK.
Yahya Radi.
Rabi.
Rabi. MashaAllah. Yahya from the UK.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shoaib Nasser from Nigeria.
Which part of Nigeria? You gotta be specific. Nigeria is too big.
Abuja.
Abuja.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Hamza. I'm from a place called High Wycombe in the UK.
So Hamza, before I introduce your twin brother,
Yeah.
just to give the viewers a hint that they will see another Hamza, right?
I'm going to see my twin brother in a minute.
MashaAllah. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Abdul Ahad and I am from London.
MashaAllah. Abdul Ahad.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Hamza and I'm from the UK.
Hamza, you don't need any introduction, mashallah. Barakallah feek. Jazakallah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Mu'een.
Not Hamza? Mashallah.
I'm also from High Wycombe in the UK.
Mashallah. Cowboy.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Howdy y'all. This is Brandon, your brother from Texas, and alhamdulillah, living here in the city of Medina.
Mashallah. Barakallah. And Brandon is studying in Kulliyat al-Sharia, mashallah. How many years now?
I was in the Ma'had for 2 years. Now I'm in second year.
So it's been 3 years. All the way from Conroe.
September was 3 years, all the way from Conroe, Texas.
Mashallah. Barakallah feek.
Yes, sir.
So you're walking around in Medina with the cowboy hat.
Yeah, sometimes, not always.
Do you have a pickup truck too?
I used to. It's a big old van though. It's a pickup truck for the desert, huh?
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. You're going to take us for a tour. Okay.
I do serious work, so we can go.
Allahu
If
Akbar.
I go with you, you're going to have to teach me. 'Cause
إن شاء الله. بارك الله فيك. طيب حبيبي, what are you going to recite from?
I will recite from the end of Surah Al-Hijr.
يلا على بركة الله. And which dialect? Which قراءة?
رواية ضد رواية خلف.
خلف. على بركة الله. بسم الله. Get ready حبيبي.
Upcoming Sheikh or Cash, huh?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولقد آتيناك سبعا من المثاني والقرآن العظيم. لا تمدن عينيك إلى ما متعنا به أزواجا منهم ولا تحزن عليهم واخفض جناحك للمؤمنين.
ما شاء الله.
وقل إني أنا النذير المبين. كما أنزلنا على المقتسمين الذين جعلوا القرآن عضين. فوربك لنسألنهم أجمعين عما كانوا يعملون. فاصدع بما تؤمر وأعرض عن المشركين. إنا كفيناك المستهزئين الذين يجعلون مع الله إلها آخر الذين يجعلون مع الله إلها آخر فسوف يعلمون ولقد نعلم أنك يضيق صدرك بما يقولون فسبح بحمد ربك وكن من الساجدين
الله.
واعبد ربك حتى يأتيك اليقين.
Amazing, beautiful يا أخي، ما شاء الله لا قوة إلا بالله. So إن شاء الله you're gonna be next Sheikh Sufi. ما شاء الله. اللهم بارك، اللهم بارك. Why are you hiding? Which قراءة? Which قراءة? حفص عن عاصم. From where? ما شاء الله. يلا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ولا تحسبن الله غافلا عما يعمل الظالمون إنما يؤخرهم ليوم تشخص فيه الأبصار مهطعين مقنعي رؤوسهم لا يرتد إليهم طرفهم وأفئدتهم هواء وأنذر الناس يوم يأتيهم العذاب فيقول الذين ظلموا ربنا أخرنا إلى أجل قريب نجب دعوتك ونتبع الرسل أولم تكونوا أقسمتم من قبل ما لكم من زوال وسكنتم في مساكن الذين ظلموا أنفسهم وتبين لكم كيف فعلنا بهم وضربنا لكم الأمثال وقد مكروا مكرهم وعند الله مكرهم وإن كان مكرهم لتزول منه الجبال فلا تحسبن الله مخلف وعده رسله إن الله عزيز ذو انتقام يوم تبدل الأرض غير الأرض والسماوات وبرزوا لله الواحد القهار وترى المجرمين يومئذ مقرنين في الأصفاد سرابيلهم من قطران وتغشى وجوههم النار ليجزي الله كل نفس ما كسبت إن الله سريع الحساب هذا بلاغ للناس ولينذروا به وليعلموا أنما هو إله واحد وليذكر أولو الألباب.
ما شاء الله أحسن الله إليك بارك الله فيكم. That was the end of Surah Ibrahim. Habibi Hamza, before we have dinner, you were talking to me about how atheism is declining in the West.
Yes.
correct?
Neo-atheism.
Oh yeah.
So the aggressive type of evangelical atheism.
But unfortunately, in the West, it is on the rise.
In
And-
the East is not right.
Yes, in the East, and in the Muslim countries, as a matter of fact,
Yes.
whether in the Gulf or in Egypt, Syria, Jordan, there are many factors. But I want to hear from you through your personal expertise. What do you think the main factors that is causing an increase in the rate of atheism in the East?
I'm not entirely sure because I haven't really lived in the East. But from my travels and my experience, so, which is limited, so what I'm saying, take it with a pinch of salt. I think it's a little bit different from the West, but also similar. Different from the point of view that it doesn't have a historical backdrop to it. Because in Europe, you had a Euro-centric issue, which was the clash between the state, which was the church, and thinking people. Generally speaking, that's a crude analysis, but there was this friction between the Catholic Church and people, right? Especially the thinkers who were trying to articulate ideas that were incongruent, not in line with the Catholic tradition. So you had the Reformation and all of that stuff, and that facilitated what you call liberalism, or the foundations for liberalism, which the idea was they wanted to see the human being as an abstract entity devoid of God's will, God's perceived will for that person and for society. So we don't have that historical baggage as a Muslim community, because we didn't have that friction, because we had a great intellectual, social, and spiritual civilizing force, civilization. So after 80 years of the death of the Prophet ﷺ, we were in Bhutan, we were in Spain, especially Spain. It was called by the academics as a convivencia, coexistence, Jews, Muslims, Christians. Some academics called it paradise on earth.
Yeah,
Even the Jewish tradition.
utopia.
Yeah, Musa bin Maymun, Maimonides, he's the second Moses of the Jewish tradition. He wrote in Arabic. He was from Spain, and he became the physician of Salahuddin Ayyubi. So we had, I would say, is the similarities are because the West have not only exported the ideas, but in terms of science and the philosophy, which not all of it is wrong. It's a tool. It's how you use the tool, and sometimes tools are used with an ideological backdrop. And in the West, the ideology is liberalism, essentially, and now postmodernism is creeping in. So what is liberalism? It's a disputative set of doctrines, but basically it's saying that the way to see yourself in society is by reducing it to the individual. Primacy is on the individual, and therefore the ethics, the understanding of who they are is reduced just to the individual, and the individual becomes sovereign and king. That's why they don't understand why we have an issue with LGBTQ+, because we don't believe we own our bodies. They believe ontologically, meaning the source and nature of who they are, they have self-ownership.
Correct.
This is an aqidah issue that we need to discuss. We shouldn't discuss from an ethical perspective. It's an aqidah issue. Allah owns me. He owns you. You don't own yourself.
That's a major difference.
Huge. It changes the whole paradigm. So therefore, Allah is going to tell you what to do with your body. The other issue is not only about self-ownership, but it's also about ethics. We always deal with this kind of maslaha, mafsada issue, the benefits and the harms. We should stop that, because benefits and harms within a framework. And our framework is divine commands. Allah commanded it, it's the best, because who is Allah? He's Al-Bar, He's the source of all goodness. He's Al-Hakim, He's Al-Alim, He's the knowing, the wise. Allah has the picture, we just have a pixel. So when Allah commands something, we know it's good for us. They don't believe in that. They have what you call a utilitarian ethic, which is the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. But how do you define happiness? What is well-being? How do you prioritize, friction between two different outlooks concerning well-being, and so on and so forth. And we believe if you follow Allah's command, it's better for the individual, society, and the whole of the community. So basically what happens, they're exporting this form of liberalism, and I think it's because of liberalism that people want to be atheist. Because there's that friction between liberalism as an ideology and what Islam says, how you should live your life. And it's happening at universities. So when I go to Turkey, sisters go to the universities even under the Erdogan rule with hijab, and they leave with no hijab. you have youth being liberalized and secularized, or they're trying to liberalize the deen, and that is a slippery slope in my view to atheism anyway, because the minute you want to distort the religion or undermine its foundations, then that basically leads to ilhad anyway. It leads to rejecting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So just in a nutshell, it's a bit different. We don't have the same historical baggage, but you know, Europe, they have this kind of supremacy. They think their history is everyone's history, and their ethics is everyone's ethics. So here, it's yours as well. So they impose it on the Muslims, especially at universities, and they're giving that liberalized mindset. And we need to be able to deal with it. So atheism is to do with that, because atheism and liberalism sometimes are like twins. But also it's us as well as Muslims. We need to be a bit more brave, I think, a bit more courageous in how we address certain isms and schisms. We need to be able to apply the Quran.
You're sugarcoating it. Rather, you mean to be on the offensive, not on the defense,
yeah,
right?
I strongly believe that. But offensive, you could be compassionately offensive, and you could have hikmah as well. But at least be on the offensive.
How can you be compassionately offensive?
Well, you could basically empathize with them. So if they have like, why did you guys, cut the hand of the thief? Or why do you guys, don't allow homosexual marriage? You say, I really appreciate you come to me with that question. I'm really happy you came to me and you didn't go to Google or whatever the case may be. You chose a Muslim to speak to. So I really respect for that. I also appreciate where you're coming from, because your backdrop is based on these certain values which have come from the education system, and they come from certain experience living in the West. So I'm a product of that too, and I really understand if you have those views or that prism, how it would shape your understanding of the world. However, I want you to stand in the possibility that that is not absolutely true. There's another way of being, another way of looking at things. Do you have 5 minutes for me to explain that to you? And then, boom, give them Tawheed, explain them Allah. And then any friction they'll have will be emotional. But once you sense the emotion, stop the intellect, buy him a pizza and be nice to him. And then over time it will work. So that's compassionate assertive, isn't it? Yeah? I haven't, jumped into their paradigm. And a big thing amongst, especially the du'at in the West, and the brothers who are going to universities in Medina, please, take this so seriously. What happens is when we study in the East, and we go to the West, and we study in the West, we adopt the epistemological and metaphysical assumptions. What does this mean? We adopt their theory of knowledge, what they believe to be true and certainty and so on and so forth. We adopt their understanding of what a human being is, which is very important when it comes to intellect and certainty and all of these things. And then we adopt certain assumptions they have about the world. And then when you have those false assumptions, you don't use the Quran and Sunnah assumptions, if you want to use those terms, or the principles. Then when you approach the Quran and Sunnah, you may think, but I have daleel, but it comes from a certain prism and a paradigm. And the Quran is like this. So when you go to the Quran and you have, for example, say you have you're excessively empirical and you think the only way to prove the Quran is through empiricism. If that's your lens, then you're going to have difficulty, because the primacy of the preservation of the Quran is the oral tradition, which has a beautiful theophilosophical grounding. And it's even in line with what the Westerners are saying now in the past 30 years on testimony. Yeah? They even have this concept of mutawatir. David Hume spoke about mutawatir, right? Tawatur reporting. Because he rejected miracles, but he said, I accept miracles if it's tawatur. But he didn't have an example. The atheists don't mention this, yeah? Anyway, the point is, we adopt those false assumptions because we have an inferiority complex, we're not assertive enough, we can't apply our principles in the modern paradigm, and we want to sound good as well. So my advice is, just be aware of that, because you fall for those traps. But in terms of dealing with atheism, a lot of his parents as well. It's a generational thing. How did they learn Islam? Was the rahmah at home?
Actually, if they have learned Islam.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because basically many parents meet me here in the haram. And the only one thing that they ask for, Sheikh, make dua for my son or my daughter to be a hafiz. So if there is the ultimate goal, they're actually gravely mistaken. Because being a hafiz, adding another MP4 player or recorder, it will not benefit even the individual himself much in our current times.
Yes.
Being a fahim is what really matters. And that's why Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man yuridillahu bi khairan yufaqihu fi din." So hifz is a great thing, definitely, but it is not everything. So if you're a hafiz of the entire Quran, but you do not necessarily know the meaning of alhaakum at-takathur, so how good is that?
Yeah, Sheikh, my view is that we have failed to internalize knowledge. So we treat knowledge as information. It's not ilm, true ilm. Because when Allah talks
It's
about
just
the people of
information.
ilm, they're people of taqwa, they're people of praying at night, they're people of fearing the day of judgment, hoping mercy from the Lord. They are people who have a way of being. But now ilm has become, just memorize all of these things. And there are two narrations attributed to Imam Malik on this issue, that ilm is not narrations.
They say
It's the beginning, of course. Memorization is key. But it's the very basic grounding that helps you. So how many of us know all of the ayat on dhikr and all the ahadith on dhikr? But do we become people of dhikr? In the way that we should? Why is there a gap between the abstract knowing and the becoming? Who we become? There's a big missing link, and my view is we need to revive the Quran and Sunnah and the classical tradition understanding of tasqatul nafs,
yeah.
the disease of the heart, right? Because you can't plant a seed on a rock. It's not going to grow, nothing's going to happen. It has to be softened with something.
This guy keeps telling me that dinner is gonna get cold.
Yeah.
So can
you
we?
start me off, you
No,
start-
I
you start
understand.
me off.
We haven't
It's hard to
finished.
stop him.
Look, we haven't finished yet. So can we
Carry on,
continue?
inshallah.
Can we continue after we?
Of course, it's not going to check my
Barakallah.
Bismillah.